Welcome to our Axios Pro Energy Policy virtual event on mining for the future. I'm Jael Holzman, Energy and Climate Policy Reporter for Axios Pro. I'd like to welcome our audiences on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, and on Axios.com. Join the conversation today on Twitter with @AxiosPro and hashtag AxiosPro. Over the next 30 minutes, we'll dive deep into how electrification and national security concerns have supercharged support for mining on Capitol Hill. I'm excited to welcome our first guest, Senator Lisa Murkowski. Thanks for joining us today, Senator.
Thank you, Jill. It's nice to be with you. Nice to be talking about such an important subject related to minerals. So great to be here.
Absolutely. We're at a critical juncture for our nation's mining industry. What is your take on the direction of U.S. mining policy and the industry writ large?
Well, I think we're doing a lot of talking about the right thing. I think that there has been a recognition that if we are going to achieve our goals when it comes to reduce emissions, when we're going to achieve our goals when it comes to renewables, we are simply going to have to be addressing the vulnerability that we have as a nation when it comes to our minerals. Last year, when you look at what the United States was importing, we were importing at least 50% of 51 different commodities. We're 100% reliant on at least 15 of them. And so when you look at what we're importing, what our need is, the growing realization that in order to attain our goals, we're going to have to really step it up when it comes to our access to minerals. Where it's estimated that the world is going to need at least 384 new graphite, lithium, nickel, and cobalt mines by the year 2040. Now think about how long it takes to develop any kind of mine in this country. And so we're talking about it. That's important. We need to do something about it.
So, as the chair of Energy and Natural Resources previously, you secured some crucial wins for the mining space, including the Energy Act of 2020. How do you think the government is doing at implementing those wins?
Yeah, we did do some good things. We were able to enact in its entirety my American Mineral Security Act. That was significant. We did a little bit more within the infrastructure bill. We did even yet a little further when it comes to directing the Department of Defense through the Defense Production Act to move forward with critical minerals. So we've done the right things legislatively, but how are we doing in implementing them? And I think this is where we're seeing a little bit of a lag. Within the Minerals Security Bill that we included, we were pushing the Department of Interior to go ahead and complete some studies. We also included some pretty gentle permitting reforms, giving the department the authority to move forward. And so where are we now? Where is Department of Interior? Well, they have wrapped the study that Congress asked them to do. They've kind of wrapped it into an interagency working group, which, in my view, you move forward an interagency working group. That to me just kind of delays actual implementation, delays things on the ground. We asked them to speed up permitting, but we're just not seeing that advance. So they're saying the right things. We need to do this. We need to reduce our reliance on others. But when we've enacted the legislation to help allow that to proceed, we're not seeing it happen fast enough. And I'll give you a very specific example because it's very, very proximate in time. We have a considerable graphite deposit in the northwestern corner of the state of Alaska. Graphite 1 is is an extraordinary project. It's a natural graphite deposit. It is the largest graphite deposit in North America, as we understand, and potentially even larger than we have currently identified. So when we think about graphite and the need for it, it's absolutely essential within our U.S. supply chain. Right now, 100% of our graphite is imported. So, okay, we recognize that we need it. Most of it's coming from China. And yet, when Graphite One has been going through the process to gain eligibility for the Defense Production Act grants, it took months and months and months for the department to finally act. We had good news on that just last week. Actually, no, it was the first of this week, and that's exciting because now they'll be able to proceed with the exploration with that grant, proceed further than where they were. I was able to go out to the Graphite One site July 8th. It was really, really, really impressive to see what they have going there and to know what the prospects are going forward.
So, really quick, you had mentioned the interagency working group. I am curious, what is the latest that you've heard from the administration? Have you heard anything on when that report could come out, when you may see the results of the work that you had so laboriously undertaken?
Well, I wish that I could tell you that I feel optimistic that it's right around the corner and it's going to going to reveal all kinds of new pathways. But I guess I'm of the mind and at the stage that we've done the studies. We've done the studies. We know where the vulnerability is, and more to the point, we have done a good deal of the work that goes into identifying. Now, I'm not saying that we're all good yet. We know that there's got to be more mapping. Again, you can't move forward with this without policies in place that are going to allow you some level of efficiency on the permitting side. That is not yet resolved. So I don't have any great updates on the interagency work group. I want us to be moving forward in a manner and a pace that meets the urgency of the need today. And we're not seeing that out of the administration. Talk is one thing, but let's get on it.
On graphite, you would send a letter to the Biden administration a while back criticizing a decision they had made to give money to a refinery in the United States that's getting all of its graphite from Mozambique, from a region that I myself have reported on being quite risky. I'm wondering, first of all, what you think should be done about how the U.S. considers the risks of where it gets its minerals outside of the United States. How should the U.S. tackle that issue?
Well, I really appreciate you raising it because, in fairness, I was really surprised, in fact, maybe even stunned, that the very first award that was given from the DPA on for critical minerals went to this Louisiana facility. Okay, no problem with processing the graphite in Louisiana, but the graphite that they were processing was coming in from Mozambique, and as you have noted, Mozambique doesn't exactly have good practices. First of all, Mozambique is a long way from Louisiana. It is in an unstable region. You're seeing growing Islamic insurgency. There have been labor strikes. There's been unrest due to lack of benefits for the workers, worker treatments. And so, you think about this, the United States is so quick to judge other nations in terms of human rights abuses and worker rights and environmental problems. But when we want the resource, all of a sudden we're going to say, okay, you shouldn't be doing that, but we need the resource, so bring it on in. And that was kind of where I felt they ended up with. That's not right, particularly when you have an alternative. And keep in mind, the Graphite One proposal was sitting before the Department of Education at the same time that they were considering this proposal for the Louisiana process. Now, Graphite One is not only natural graphite, not only a huge deposit, it is a domestic uh, project in a stable environment where we have environmental standards that are higher than most others, employing U.S. not only U.S. workers but helping with the native populations in an area where you have high unemployment. The processing for the Graphite One project is going to be domestic as well. That's going to be located in Washington State. So why and how the Department of Energy felt that somehow or other we should go forward and give an award of $102 million. This was a loan, but there was also a $220 million grant for the Louisiana/Mozambique project. So I'm looking at this and it just doesn't make sense. And I've raised it multiple times with the secretary. I am pleased again that they have gone forward with the Graphite One project, but it just seemed like they, again, perhaps waited a little bit longer than was necessary. But to Graphite One's credit, they have hung in there and they are ready to go.
One quick follow-up, and then I have a question that I'm sure you will be very excited to hear. It seems like the issue here in part is how the government considers risk in the money it gives in cases like these. I guess, the Energy Department has talked about possibly doing some form of due diligence on the funding it gives to projects to weigh these sorts of risks. Obviously, you see part of the solution is funding and permitting more domestic mining. I understand that. I think a lot of folks want to see that. But I'm wondering, on the due diligence side, do you think that DOE should have to more scrutinize the risk here of, relying on foreign minerals having social and environmental risks?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, we do it with other policies. And, I get where the administration wants to go with what they're calling, the whole concept of friend shoring. We want to get our mineral resources from Canada. We want to get our mineral resources from Australia. I get all that, but I do think that there's a place for the mineral security partnership. I understand that, but I don't think that there should be a replacement for what we can and should do domestically. So you've got the emphasis on domestic because that gives you surety of supply. But to your point about risk, we need to be evaluating critically. We need to care that we are not only providing federal taxpayer dollars that could go to help a country, again, where you have environmental degradation, where you have human rights and worker rights challenges. We can't close our eyes to that. We can't close our eyes to the political unrest in these places just in an effort to gain the resource, particularly when we have access to the resource here. We've got to be thinking about American mineral independence. And I don't know what we're ever going to be able to be independent, but we certainly can become less vulnerable. And that's what we need to strive to do.
A key ask that, folks in the mining trades have been pursuing, as well as the automotives, battery sector, et cetera, is more permitting changes by Congress.
Right.
There are a lot of folks who want to see it. We got enough time for one more question. I am curious what you think the odds are of this Congress tackling permitting again.
Yeah, I am one that is encouraged because the conversations on both the Republican and the Democrat side in Congress and the administration continue with a recognition that there is more to do when it comes to permitting and permitting reform. And so I know that there's differences. Democrats want to see more transmission. Republicans would like to see more with regards to the Endangered Species Act or the Clean Water Act. I think we all want to figure out ways to cut down on the delays that we are all seeing. But I think the administration right now has an opportunity to step up and actually implement some of the work that we've already put into place with the recently passed a debt limit bill, what we put in place again a little bit with the IRA. So there are some things that can be put in place, but we are not done. And I think that there's a keen recognition that there is more to do, and I believe a bipartisan willingness to make that happen. That's what's going to get us less vulnerable on others when it comes to our mineral resources.
Well, Senator Murkowski, it is a pleasure to have you here with us at Axios. Thank you so much for your time and expertise.
Thank you. I love talking about this stuff because we've got so much to do and the possibilities are endless. So thank you. Thank you for letting me be with you today.
Now time for our next guest, Congressman Eric Swalwell. How you doing, Congressman? It's great to see you.
You too. Thanks for having me back on.
It's a pleasure. So just to get started, today we're talking about mining policy. Folks may not know the role you play navigating bipartisan mineral policy. Tell us a little bit about the Critical Materials Caucus.
Yeah, we probably don't have a mine in my congressional district in the San Francisco Bay Area, but we invent a lot of things there that rely upon what is explored in mines across the world. And so the Critical Minerals Caucus, our goal is frankly to mine it, process it, and magnetize it in America to counter China's dominance in the space so that we have our own supply chain resilience going forward. So it's a bipartisan effort. And we've recognized from COVID the need to have American resiliency in this space.
How does the defense authorization that's moving forward right now, the military authorization, how does that deal with the issue of mineral security?
Well, we were able to pass a bipartisan amendment in the National Defense Authorization Act that says it is a priority of the U.S. government to mine, process, and magnetize in the U.S. That we recognize what Secretary Raimondo found in her national security report, which is we are lagging because of China's dominance. And in fact, in her report, she endorsed a production tax credit that Guy Reschenthaler and I have written, which would give a real incentive for anyone who mines in the United States to process and magnetize here in the United States.
So Democrats historically have had some conflicts intra-party on what to do with the hard rock mining space. What is your take on how Democrats handle mining these days?
Look, if we can recycle the water, and there's a mine in California that's doing that, MP Materials mine in Southern California. If you can recycle the water, you avoid a lot of the groundwater acid pond-like environmentally toxic situations. So I'm convinced that the technology is there. I've seen it in actual function at Mountain Pass, but also in the national laboratories in my congressional district, that we can do this in an environmentally sound way. And as I said, it's a race against the clock because China is buying up mining rights all over the world. Even the mines that we have in the United States, if we were to fully explore them, we still don't have a processing and magnetizing infrastructure capability here. So you would still have to ship to China for that part of it. And so we want, as I said, mine it, process it, magnetize it all here in the United States. That has to be the goal.
What do you think the pathway is to achieving that goal broadly? Is it permitting changes? Is it more money to the government? Is it more money to the mining companies? What's the solution?
Well, we're up against China, right? It's a state that can put almost unlimited resources, state resources. They don't have to go to a Congress. They don't have to answer, to a press. They don't have to answer, to the public. They can just dominate the space. Obviously, we are not in a position to do that, but that doesn't mean, as I said, that we cannot have, for example, a production tax credit that would incent, American companies to do that. And we're seeing at Mountain Pass, by the way, they are going to produce on site, which will be the first time in America that you will see that with rare earths. But to really scale it up and to process on site everything that they pull out of the earth, there's going to have to be a tax credit. And again, even our tax credit, we estimate it is 1/20th probably the scale of what China would be investing in the rare earth space. But we have to get in the game, and that's the first big step to do it.
Let's talk about China. At our Energy Policy Pro newsletter, we've been covering closely the bipartisan march, a slow one, albeit one with clear intent to deal with the risks that our energy supply chain, as it currently is constructed globally, the risks that exist, according to security experts, and as well, the risks that action to deal with the problem could pose to the energy transition. I guess, first of all, how do you think Democrats should reckon with the role that China plays in our energy industry today?
Yeah, we need to, onshore, friendshore, nearshore access to these resources. We cannot be dependent upon China at all, especially anything that touches national security. And so many, of our defense components do come in the rare earth space. Now, look, both countries can be economically competitive. We can both be economic giants, without a military standoff. However, I do, as I take a step back and look at this, keeping Ukraine in the fight sends a signal to China that we can assemble a global alliance. Giving Taiwan the defense and cyber resources they need can make sure that they're prepared if there ever was, a showdown with China. And then here at home, recognizing that if there is a showdown with China, that we will have invested in, whether it's rare earths, access to lithium and other, components you need for battery storage, that we have our own, supply chains that do not depend on China. I think that's the best way to be prepared.
Can you explain why relying on China for all of these materials? I understand they have a history, but is any reliance a risk, essentially? Or can there be some Chinese industry present in our supply chain without dismantling the whole thing wholesale?
Sure. American companies are still, where, they need to produce goods are going to look all over the world, and that will probably include China. That doesn't mean we shouldn't, race to manufacture, as much of, those goods as we can in the United States. But I do think finding and striking more partnerships, with our friends, with other democracies, has to be the priority and has to be the key. I will also say, look, China recognizes, and I think we probably recognize that, a sanctions war with China would be different than a sanctions war with Russia, where we consume very little of what Russia makes, and Russia makes very little other than oil and gas. And so China, obviously, a lot is imported from over there. That's why, again, I think we need to look onshore and, toward our friends to increase the trade routes.
Do you think there's any, there are some of your colleagues on the other side of the aisle that are calling for an absolute decoupling, effectively, to use whatever policy solutions imaginable to even restrict what US companies can do with Chinese companies.
Look,
your message sounds, yeah, sorry.
My focus in that space is national security first. Like, let's not, try and do too much on this and end up doing nothing at all. We know on our defense systems that, China controls 65% of the rare earth mining, 85% of processing, and 90% of magnetizing. And that is a real risk for our national defense needs, especially as we are, doing everything we can to help Ukraine stay in the fight, and we're burning through, a lot of, these defense systems to make sure Ukraine has them. We're also going to need them in our own defense. So we don't want to be dependent on a country that we could be in a potential conflict with. But all of that being said, I still believe you can see the U.S. and China as economic giants who don't have to have a military showdown, don't have to have harsh sanctions that self-sabotage the economies of both countries. We can avoid that, but we should plan, as I said, for what it could look like if we were to lose that supply channel from China.
It's interesting you bring up the subject of self-sabotage. There is a language currently moving in the House appropriations process that would ban the Energy Department, a critical vehicle for funding an energy transition, from giving its funds to companies that engage in commerce with many entities of concern, including Chinese companies. Do you think a ban on federal funding to companies that do business with China is a good idea?
Well, again, I'm focused on the national security space. I think that has to be the priority. I also, by the way, I have legislation that was put into the FAA reauthorization, which essentially prevents, Chinese technologies or Chinese bus companies from being able to be purchased by anything that touches federal aviation infrastructure. Again, that's more for a security reason. But no, if you're talking about a company that is manufacturing a home good, like furniture, etc. I don't think right now it's in both interests for China, to ban, for China to ban its citizens from consuming American goods, and likewise for Americans to have a ban on consuming anything or making anything over there right now. Again, I'm focused on national security. I think that's where the real risk is. And, I don't want to sabotage our economy or dramatically raise the cost of goods for my constituents.
Given how politicized conversation around China has become, and how the other side of the aisle is clearly racing toward a more restrictionist tack, can you help me understand the challenges of messaging on China to the American people?
Well, I think the American people get it, right? They see a country that cheats in almost every way, right? Economic espionage, intellectual property theft, steel dumping, currency manipulation. They're on the hook for all of that. And by the way, essentially a concentration camp of sorts with the way that they treat Uyghurs. Massive human rights violations that you're seeing, which is just awful. It's abhorrent. It should stop. And a press that has that is not free, and human rights that are almost non-existent. So regardless of where you are in America, you look at a China that does not look like anything we have here. So I do think across political spectrum and across the country, China is regarded as a bad actor, and that's why I would caution them if they were ever to violently try and overtake Taiwan, that Americans I think would react harshly to that and would want to do everything to assist Taiwan if that was the case.
At the same time, though, it does sound as though you'd like to have the nuance of at least saying we shouldn't entirely take them off the table for American companies to do business with, essentially.
I'm saying where an American company, is not going to manufacture an American good here, whether it's in Mexico, our best trading partner, or somewhere else in the world, if it doesn't touch national security, that's not my focus. right now. National security, I think, has to be the focus. Otherwise, we risk, everyday middle-class Americans paying, dramatically more for everyday household needs. And I'm not looking to do that to anybody, especially as we're starting to finally see inflation come down.
Well, thank you for that candid discussion on China. I have one last question for you. I guess I'm just curious what lessons you've taken away. Your district doesn't have any major mining operations in it, but you've learned a great deal. What do you think is the most important lesson you've learned about mining in your time running the caucus?
Well, that my constituents and Americans get it, that we depend too much on these materials to let a country like China dominate the space. But two, that we can do it in an environmentally friendly way, that we are that inventive, and that we have the ability to do it. And three, it's just, do we have the will? And as I said, I'm heartened that Secretary Raimondo included in her national security report an endorsement of the bipartisan production tax credit. And so now it's time to get the job done, because we all recognize the problem. She has endorsed our major solution on this problem. And so now it's time in the year 2023 to get the job done.
Well, I have to once again say it's always a pleasure to speak with you, Congressman. Thank you so much. And now I will let you get back to maybe listening to some Taylor Swift. I know I will.
Yes, don't threaten me with a good time. Thank you.
Thank you all for joining us this afternoon for another virtual conversation that has made everyone smarter, faster. For the latest on what's happening in energy and climate policy on Capitol Hill, or to subscribe to Axios Pro, visit axios.com/pro. Thank you again for joining, and we'll see you on axios.com/pro.